Spirit of Peru. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama's pick to lead U.S. and allied troops in Afghanistan testified a few days ago before the Senate Armed Services Committee in his first public remarks since being tapped in May. Lieutenant General Stanley McChrystal formerly served as commander of the Joint Special Operations Command from 2003 to 2008. During that time, he oversaw a secretive program to hunt down and assassinate suspected terrorists around the globe. Last year, lawmakers delayed Stanley McChrystal's nomination for a key position because of questions about prisoner abuse by forces under his command. Many of the reports of abuse center on Camp Nama, a U.S. base near Baghdad's airport where special operations troops ran an interrogation and detention center. The abuses included beating prisoners with rifle butts, stripping them naked, subjecting them to extreme cold and sleep deprivation, and using them for target practice and paintball games. Until the Senate hearing last Tuesday, Lieutenant General McChrystal had never spoken publicly about the treatment of prisoners by troops under his command. In his opening remarks to the Senate Armed Services Committee, he addressed the issue.
As this committee knows, since 9/11, our forces have learned valuable lessons regarding the treatment of detainees and made mistakes along the way. When I took command in 2003, I found our treatment of detainees followed existing guidance but needed improvement. Our facilities were limited. Our expertise in specialties like interrogation was insignificant or insufficient, and we lacked organizational experience at every level. In the months and years that followed, we invested considerable energy, developed expertise and experience, and improved continuously. If confirmed, I will strictly enforce the highest standards of detainee treatment consistent with international and U.S. law.
Democratic Senator Carl Levin of Michigan, the chair of the Armed Services Committee, first to question Lieutenant General McChrystal, was the only committee member to ask about detainee abuse in Iraq.
What was your understanding, your awareness of the treatment of detainees when you were the overall commander? The Inspector General of the Department of Defense indicated that a memorandum of the Secretary of Defense, which was approved on December 2nd, 2002, and that memorandum relative to the interrogation of detainees authorized the use of things like stress position, sleep deprivation, and the use of dogs. And the report of this committee showed how that memorandum of December 2nd, 2002, then went to first Afghanistan and then was transmitted verbatim to Iraq. And in terms of the treatment of detainees, when you got there, tell us what you were aware of, what you did relative to that subject.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I took over in October of 2003, and I'd like to sort of start with three things to begin with. First, I do not and never have condoned mistreatment of detainees and never will. When we found cases where we thought there was an allegation of mistreatment, we investigated every one and we punished if in fact it was substantiated, and that was from the beginning. That said, when I took command, I found the detainee facilities really insufficient for need. They were physically not prepared for that. We didn't have the right number of interrogators. We didn't have the right experience in the force either. None of us had ever done this with the level of precision that we needed to, so we learned. We stayed within all of the established and authorized guidelines. They were in them when I took command, and then with each change in guidelines, we did a legal review and stayed within those all the time. But it also, as I outlined last year when we discussed it, it also was something that I believe continuously improved. Each month we got better at it for lots of reasons. One, our experience got better. Two, the procedures got just constantly looked at, and so that they were improved. So I think the constant improvement is the thing that took us from what I think was acceptable and legal to something that I became much more proud of over time in terms of the quality of the operation.
And when you say acceptable and legal, you mean that they were within the guidelines established by the Secretary of Defense?
So they were within legally prescribed guidelines. That's right, the policy we were given.
The policy that you were given,
yes,
that you understood at that time was legal?
Yes, sir. That's
and
right.
That policy included at that time, under that December 2, 2002 memorandum of the Secretary of Defense, that policy included the aggressive acts that I described: stress positions, the use of dogs, and nudity. Is that correct?
Sir, it did. We did not use all of the things that were outlined there.
Some of them were used?
Some of them were used when I took over, sir, and then as we immediately began to reduce that.
You immediately began what?
To reduce those, sir.
Okay.
Arizona Republican John McCain, the committee's ranking member, briefly asked Lieutenant General McChrystal about his views toward interrogation techniques.
Given your experience in Afghanistan, do you believe that the interrogation techniques that are provided in the Army Field Manual are sufficient to get the information to fight the battle that you need?
Yes, sir, I do.
Do you believe any additional techniques are necessary?
No, sir.
For more, we're joined on the phone by Mark Orlasco, former intelligence and targeting analyst at the Pentagon, now senior military analyst at Human Rights Watch. He co-wrote a report in July 2006 called No Blood, No Foul that documented abuses at Camp Nama. In that report, a U.S. military interrogator is quoted as saying he had seen McChrystal visit the center a couple of times. The interrogator, given the pseudonym Jeff in the report, also said he was told by the colonel in charge that he knew directly from General McChrystal and the Pentagon that the Red Cross would not be allowed to inspect the center. Mark Orlasco, welcome to Democracy Now!
Thanks.
Do you feel these issues were addressed in this hearing?
Oh, no, absolutely not. You know, it seemed to be a very orchestrated confirmation hearing. Really, softballs were the best that he got, and I think that Levin and McCain, while they raised the issue, didn't raise it to the level of detail that we would like. I mean, if you look at our report, No Blood, No Foul, first of all, it's titled No Blood, No Foul because Task Force 626, which was at Camp Nama, the one that was perpetrating the abuse, that was their motto, meaning no blood, no foul. If there is no blood, if we cause no blood to be spilled, then nothing wrong has been done. And in fact, they used a paintball logo, no blood, no foul, so that if you were shooting someone with paintballs, there could be welts, but if you didn't break the skin, that was fine. And it really became a moniker for the treatment at the camp. It became so pervasive there, the torture that went on, that later the military actually disciplined 34 members of that task force, and 5 were eventually convicted of prisoner abuse at Nama. But even though we were able to place General McChrystal there at the time of abuse, he was never asked the hard questions about what was his role at Nama and what did he do and what did he know.
I'm looking at a piece from Washington Independent. The interrogator you talked to, Jeff, this is talking about another one, if it's not the same, who goes by the name Matthew Alexander, who said that General McChrystal, he was there in Iraq often. He may have been separated from these things by a couple layers of subordinates, but it wouldn't have been his responsibility. It would have been his responsibility to know what was going on. And it says a few weeks ago, Alexander spoke with Mark Jacobson, a top Senate Armed Services Committee staffer, by phone for about half an hour about McChrystal. While Alexander didn't say he worked with McChrystal while serving in Iraq as an interrogator, he declined to specify in an interview that he was a member of the secretive Task Force 626. He communicated that the Senate panel ought to clarify what knowledge McChrystal had of the abuse. Mark Orlasco, so they're fully aware, the panel. Why do you think, I mean, we're not talking about John McCain not asking the question. We're talking about, well, Carl Levin touched on it, but didn't expand, not to mention the other members of the Senate committee.
No, you're absolutely right. And in fact, the Pat Tillman questions were far, far harder on McChrystal than the detainee abuse questions. And it seems as if it has become a fait accompli that, you know, he's been anointed to be the one to take over the hard fight in Afghanistan. Everyone believes that he is the choice of Petraeus and others. They don't want to make any waves. You also have the issue where Democrats are afraid of being branded as weak on defense issues, and so this is an easy one to get through. And look, perhaps he is the right guy for Afghanistan. Perhaps with his knowledge of special forces, his understanding of special forces, and all of the problems that we've seen with special forces in Afghanistan, particularly with civilian casualties, show that we need that type of person. But you don't want to put someone in charge of the Bagram Air Base prison, which has really become the de facto replacement for Guantanamo Bay, if he has a history of detainee abuse. And these are important questions that need to be answered, and they have not even been asked, and it's really quite stunning that the Democrats have just rolled over on this one so easily.
Do you think it's because they're concerned about what his answers would be?